Slurp you don't, my G's. How are you all doing? Today, I've got a box of English tea, but that's not really important. What is important is that I've had a haircut, and it's quite streamlined. It's a little bit like a fighter jet. It's a little bit like a dam buster, like this fighter jet that like blew up like a dam with like a bomb from history. Remember that? Anyway, I've made a faceplant bass called the DAMBUSTER bass. So you can see my logic now. Oh yeah, logic. Let's get into logic.
The parables of faceplant.
I've got a wicked faceplant bass today. We're going to play it in just a moment. Basically, I wanted to make a sound that sort of uses sine waves together only, and also a little bit of textured noise. So easy to follow along. And we've got a lot of like post-processing like in the faceplant effects section going on here to create this sound. And I've got 4 macros that I've made as well to give it some extra different rhythms within the sound. And yeah, I'll drop this one on Discord for the Patreon gang. If you want to grab it there, then you're more than welcome. And yeah, aside from that, also check out the presets on my website if you're new to the channel. I've got some wicked Vital and faceplant ones on there. I've got some new merchandise on my website as well, some t-shirts, some beanie hats if you want to support the channel that way. And yeah, I've also got a couple of extra slots opening up for mentorship as well. If you know anyone wants any one-on-one sessions, you can book in directly from my homepage. Anyway, let's have a little listen to today's faceplant bassline. So lots of different little movements and things going on there, but I'm going to sort of set everything back to the sort of classic settings of the sound, and then we'll jump straight into the voicing.
Listen.
So if we jump into creating this sound, like I said, it's sine waves and a bit of a textured noise. And the modulations, we got 2 little things going on. We've got like a pyramid LFO, and we've got a square wave LFO. And these are going to be adding some movement into the sound, but primarily just in the effects section and also on the global unison mode as well, which is very important for this sound when we switch that on in a moment. But anyway, the first sound I started off with was just one of my textures. I made a little like texture library bank for the Discord crew, which is like 20 little noise sounds. And this is one called Direction, and it's just like a sort of a noisy wind atmosphere type thing. And what we're going to do next is we're going to add in a couple of sine waves. So I've got one here at -12. Nothing else on there. What I do is I always double click on the attack and release so that it goes from 10 and 100. So it's like a little bit of a more fade in and like more fading out. So I like that it's a bit smoother. Another one, sine wave here, and I'm just detuning it. So it's -11.45. So there's already like a little bit of a wobble between the sine waves due to the detuning. Then I've got a third sine wave here, which is an octave lower, so -24. And I'm sending this one out to lane 3. So what's going to happen is we're going to do quite a lot of effects on these like main mid-range sine waves, and the low sine wave, like the low sub bass, is just going to have a couple of like sort of mastering effects right on at the end. So that's all of our voicing together, and we're going to go ahead and switch on the global unison already. And what's going to happen here is we're basically going to be using the frequency stack mode, which is the one that I like the best because it has some really like creative and interesting harmonics it puts into the sound. My G's, do you know what I mean, selector? Okay, so what you can see here is that I've got a LFO set on it already. So if I switch that off, the unison is at 3, and basically you see when I play with the range, you get different, yeah, like kind of octaves. And so what I wanted to do was to blend between 2 of these like different tones. And that's why I used a square LFO, so I don't have any of the sort of pitching up that would happen if I went up like this, you know. I'd have all this pitching chaos. And what I wanted was to just have the 0% and the minus 100% as the two like options. And so I've put that onto an LFO that's a square, so it's always one or the other. And yeah, just kind of chose a timing that sort of fit with the beat of my track. But yeah, obviously the unison like massively impacts the sound already and makes it a lot like larger than life. And yeah, that's basically the voicing section done. So let's move on to the effects, my G's.
Effects.
So what's really going to bring this sound into life is going to be mainly a nice bit of filtering and a nice bit of phase distortion. Obviously the unison did a big impact already, but these are the second two, the next two main impacts that happen. So it's kind of a like three main things, like the unison, the filtering, and the phase distortion, that are going to like, you know, give this sound its edge. So we're going to add in a filter just in a moment, but firstly I put a little bit of reverb in first, and I do it on the snap heap, so I can do a convolver reverb, turn the mix all the way up. The Falkland Palace, again, it kind of ties in with this little military theme, and taking out the low end with a 3-band EQ, and then gaining it all the way up, and then mixing in the overall effect. So we get a nice bit high-end reverb into the signal already, and then that's going to be distorted, and everything's going to be done, you know, to that whole like reverbed bass. So next up, I've got the filter. This is like one of the main parts of the sound again. And so here I add the filter to the LFO1, and it's just at one, like basically the default speed, which kind of just worked for me. Yeah, so that's going just opening and closing a low pass filter. And next up, basically, you know, I've taken out all of the high end essentially, and we're gonna like reintroduce it again now. But basically, I've used a ring mod to put some noise back into the sound. And you might be thinking like, why did you like add the noise here before? Well, it actually does like still like impact the whole sound and like give it a little bit more complexity like before it goes into the filter. So it's still worth like putting like all those sounds like together like before we filter it. But anyway, now we're going to add in a bit more high end again. And so I've got the ring mod, and when I turn up the bias and the rectifier all the way, and you know, have band pass noise set on here, and then turn the frequency rate, you know, it's around 1K, I suppose. And just mix it in a little bit. I get this like nice little distorted noise in the high end back into the sound. Next up, we got some phase distortion. And if you notice, this one is quite a subtle one. So the drive is like 35% and the tone is quite low, so it does sound quite juicy up here. I might leave it a little bit higher. I think it sounds a bit better this way. Anyway, next up, distortion, hard clipping. This is basically just like boosting the whole volume, like in a sense. It's not doing too much to the tone of the sound, but the next part is the next phase distortion that I've used, which is actually affecting it quite a lot more here. Yeah, I'm going to bring that tone from the first one back down again. So basically, because this second one is bringing out some of the elements that you didn't really hear much before, and now with that tone that I kind of turned up, it felt like it was a bit too much. So there was a reason why I left it down low in the first place, I suppose. But yeah, here it's really coming into its own, this sound. And basically we put the LFO1 on the drive, so it really, you know, opens and closes nicely here. I find it better to sort of play with the drive on an automation rather than the mix. Yeah, it just seems to like sound a little bit nicer. Then again, like it's still a very low pass filtered sound, and I do want some of those high end harmonics in there. So I've got a 3-band EQ, just boosting up the high end nice and simply. And yeah, let's like next blend everything in a little bit with itself. We'll lose a little bit of power in the process, but we'll spread things out a little bit so they kind of gel together with the ensemble. So if I turn that up, you know, kind of like a chorus basically. 16 voices, motion on sine, nice bit of 30% detuning, spreading the sound quite nicely, and then mixing that back in. Getting a nice sweet spot where we've got that extra width and that extra kind of blended together feeling, but still have like enough of that bass power in the low end as well. So about 20 to 30% is pretty good for that kind of effect in this case. And then I've got a ring mod, which is where we're going to have this extra little flutter that comes in. So whenever the LFO goes up and it sort of the sound opens up, we'll have a little bit of a tremolo. So I can exaggerate the effect here because I've put the mix of this one onto a macro here. So every time the sound comes up, the flutter effect like kicks in, and we can control the amount here. And how the flutter works, basically, it's a ring mod using the sine oscillator and turning up the bias all the way, and then having the frequency very, very low. It uses the kind of sine wave to create this like fast tremolo effect in a sense, and we can control the exact speed here. So whatever you kind of prefer. A slower little wobble like that is pretty cool as well. And when I just mix that back a bit, not like really, really noticeable, but it is making like an impact to the overall like life and shape of the sound. So I like that in there a lot. And just brushing over the macros, these two other ones here, the speed, basically just controlling the speed of the LFOs. So, you know, they've already set to all their parameters and doing their thing, and now it's just how fast do we want that all to happen at the same time, you know? Same with the square one here. Doing that unison pitch, sort of up and down octave switch at a faster rate by switching that up here. I'm going to leave that down, and the final one, the clean one, I basically just turned down some of that, you know, ring mod noise that I added in earlier, and I also believe maybe turned the filter down, or I turned the tone of one of the main distortions down, so it's just taking out some of the main effects that introduce the high end, essentially, so you can have a little version of the sound that's like a bit softer for like the intro or something like that. But yeah, then we have our final two effects, and these are the ones where I mentioned earlier where we have like a low sub bass that comes in. This one goes into this lane, so now we're like blending that sub bass with everything else that we've just affected on its own. And the sub bass is also at like 200%, whereas the normal mid basses are like at 100, so the sub is like a lot louder in comparison. So when we add it in now, we're just going to do some soft sort of touching of the like effects. So just driving it, just a little bit of overdrive, and then a little bit of a high end boost. And at that point, I've reached a part, you know, a moment in the sound where I thought it sounds interesting enough. It's got a nice movement. It's got a nice powerful low end. It's got a nice bit of filtering and interest in the change of the harmonics. It's got enough high end so that we're covering the whole frequency range. It's got a nice width to it through the spread that I've done on the ensemble and a few of the other parameters where I've spread the sound out. But you know, I've gone just enough to like give it some width, but keep that mono power in there as well. And yeah, essentially got to that point where I thought it was like a really filled out, kind of nice sounding bass, and at that point decided to save it and call it the DAMBUSTER, and here we go, here it is. But yeah, nice way to make a cool bass, basically just using sine waves and like a tiny bit of a textural kind of white noise, and everything else done like through the processing and the effects, majoritively through the frequency stack unison mode, which adds in a load of extra harmonics that weren't there before from in the sine waves. And then also having a really like obvious low pass filter to really like shape the sound up and down and give it that, you know, like dynamic movement. And then thirdly, like having a bit of that phase distortion to sort of bring out the growly aspect of like these sort of elements that are sort of hidden before. So yeah, that's the overall summing up of this patch today. But yeah, guys, if you like my content and you feel like it's helped you out, you want to say thanks, come along and join Patreon, and you can get into my Discord and meet some really, really inspiring and lovely people from all over the world who are on a journey to improve their music and keep positive through all kinds of crazy times in the world. Anyway, it's been a pleasure. Thank you. Much love. Peace out. Goodbye. Adios. Muchachos. Ciao.
Too great.